Welcome back. I'm Anjanette Levy, and thanks for joining us here in our second hour of our lunch hour Q&A. It's a Friday special edition. We're here for 2 hours taking your questions, and there have been a lot of great ones coming in about the YNW Melly double murder trial. So keep those coming in on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. But just to bring you up to speed on where we stand in this case, we've just wrapped up the second week of testimony. The rapper, known for his hit Murder on My Mind, faces 2 counts of first-degree murder and the deaths of his friends and fellow rappers Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas. Those victims went by the names YNW Sack Chaser and YNW Juvie. And these were lifelong friends, all of these guys. Defendant Jamel Demons and his co-conspirator Cortland Henry were in the car with the 2 victims on October 26, 2018. They were leaving a recording studio, and then what happened afterwards is in dispute. Cortland Henry shows up at the hospital with Juvie and Sack Chaser in the vehicle. They are dead. Melly is nowhere to be found. The prosecution says those gunshots were fired from inside the vehicle by Melly, and Melly says, hey, I didn't do it. I wasn't in the car. So that's where we stand. As I mentioned, we're taking your questions this hour. Keep them coming in. With me is Terri Austin of Law&Crime. She's an attorney and host here and has been in the courtroom all week covering the case for us. Michael Bryant is an attorney and host here at Law&Crime as well. And Offie Patterson is an attorney out in California. So thanks for being with us. Let's get right to the questions. Terri, let me send this one over to you. Did they search for any of Melly's clothing from that night? This comes from Delmar Durham from YouTube.
You listen to the defense and their opening, the answer is no, they did not search for clothing of anyone, frankly. They did have a t-shirt in that car. I think it belonged to Anthony, if I'm not mistaken. And they did do some DNA analysis on that t-shirt, the front of the t-shirt and the back of the t-shirt. But one of the things that the defense said during their opening was, look, they did not follow up on anything as far as Henry was concerned, as far as Melly was concerned. No clothing, and so the answer to the question is it doesn't seem as though they really followed up on what was in the car other than, you know, some of the bottles and some of the shoes, and nothing that the defendants, and as you know, Henry is one of the co-defendants, that case has been severed, but I haven't seen any evidence of any analysis of the clothing that either of the defendants was wearing.
Okay, Goody Great from YouTube. Why does Melly, Michael Bryant, need 3 defense lawyers?
Well, there's no rule about how many you do need or have
Right.
to have. And sometimes a case is broken down into subparts so that certain attorneys will handle a certain number of witnesses, or maybe there's somebody that does just the medical, or somebody does just the cell phone data, or maybe somebody who does just the DNA. So I don't know, you know, is it a show of force? Is it like, hey, let's see how many attorneys I've got. How many do you guys have? I don't think it's that. I think sometimes a case can be complex, can need attorneys with specific talents, and you've always got a lead attorney and the others are kind of helping carry the load. So I don't make a whole lot of the fact that he's got 3 attorneys here.
And, you know, David Howard is obviously the lead guy on this. He's the lead attorney. He's got a lot of presence about him. This is also a death penalty case, so maybe there are attorneys with specialties in that area as well, the mitigation part of this. Let's go to you, Offie. Will or has the jury been made aware of the discovery of evidence violation, the discovery violation that we heard about the other day by the prosecution? And this question comes to you, Offie, from Brittany Garcia from YouTube.
Oh, thank you, Brittany. What discovery violation in particular are we talking about?
Oh, there was some evidence the other day.
There are lots of breaches.
Well, there was some evidence specifically the other day regarding cell phone testimony. The defense said they didn't get that information. The judge said this is a discovery violation.
So usually I'll say no, because a lot of times attorneys will argue outside of the presence of the jury. And I do believe the prosecution, they turned over some information to the defense, I think the morning of, during trial. One of the attorneys, one of the defense counsel said that she received it via email And I think there was some confusion about she asked the prosecutor to please, as a professional courtesy, can you please print these documents? And she did not want to do that. And I do recall the judge saying, Jesus, just print the documents for her. I might be paraphrasing, but I know he did say, Jesus, print something for her. Usually the jury will not be apprised that an attorney is going to be reprimanded or admonished because they didn't follow a procedure. So I'll say no to that. But again, the prosecutor has had a lot of challenges with turning over evidence and with following the proper procedures and evidentiary protocols to get different things into court.
Well, and certainly, you know, this did happen outside the presence of the jury. So the jury is not going to be made aware of this. The judge is not going to say, hey, the prosecution, I just said they had a discovery violation. So that is not going to be something that the jury should be learning about. They're just not allowed to present that evidence. John Schmutnick from Twitter, if you were a juror and had to decide right now, how would you go, guilty or not guilty, Terri Austin? You were in the courtroom all week.
Well, if I had to decide today, and I'm sitting on that jury, and I've heard the evidence thus far that the prosecution has put forth, I would say not guilty. And I certainly think that's where the jury is right now. They have to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt, and there are multiple doubts in this case so far. Nothing I've seen, not the DNA so far, not the gun ballistics information, nothing I've seen so far has put Melly in that car with the gun and has him as the shooter. They're gonna have to do much more. We might see more. The case is not over. We talked about having the medical examiner, but right now, I think the defense is ahead, and if they had to poll that jury, as we've been polling our viewers, I think the jury would say not guilty.
Well, and we're definitely not at the end of the case. We're nearing it, probably the end of the state's case, but not there quite yet. This one, Michael Bryant, comes from Sherry Reedy, 5695, exclamation point. Does the phone evidence submitted so far show that it was in fact Melly using his phone? And will the T-Mobile service be able to show that the murders happened from inside the vehicle?
Oh, Sherry, don't get me started on that cell phone stuff. Yeah, I mean, we all know that it has some general purpose. Okay, there was a phone in the car. It was attached to Melly. Okay, you know, so what? I think there's no way you can conclude that Jamel Demons did these murders just because a phone attached to his name was in the proximity of the shootings. I just think it's just too tenuous without more corroboration. So, yeah, if you're hanging your hat on that cell phone stuff, I think it's a loser.
Our next question, we'll send this one over to you. Do you think he is still at a good point in the case? This one is for you from Roxanne McGurr, 2341, Offie.
Okay, do I think he's at a good point in the case? Melly? I think that, again, the prosecution has not put him with the gun and pulling the trigger. I think that the studio footage shows us that he was in the vehicle. We don't doubt that. But what happened when they left? The prosecution has not just shown us enough evidence to point to him as the trigger man. So I do believe at this point, he's in a good spot. But I think the judge allowed some text messages between what we believe or what they believe is Melly and his mother in. I think they're going to introduce that later on in the trial. They had a motion in limine ad hoc session between the defense counsel and prosecution, and the judge went ahead and said, hey, we're going to go ahead and let these text messages in. And there's a mention of a Glock. There is conversations between Melly and his mom about being afraid. Where are you? Pinpointing your location. And that was immediately after the murder. So I expect to see a lot more. But at this point, I think he's in a good spot right now.
Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot still going on with this case. You know, we've got a short week this week, and then we'll be back for a full 4 days next week. So it'll be interesting to see what transpires then. Catherine Lee, 14 from Twitter, Terri Austin asks, I haven't seen any expert witness yet testify to the bullet hole found on the inside of the rear driver's side door jamb. Seems like that would happen if the passenger left the vehicle and left the door open to stage the shootout. Has this been discussed?
It has not been discussed as yet. I mean, we did see some experts talking about the trajectory of those bullets from the back seat to the front seat, and they had some straw-like looking pieces sticking out of the back seat into the front seat. But they haven't given any details about all of those bullets coming inside. Basically, we just know from the opening that the bullets are from the outside as well. So I think, frankly, I'd like some more clarity as to where the rest of those bullets went. You can see there in those pictures, they're showing those trajectories with those, you know, I guess they are like straws. And, you know, the defense actually did a very good job at disputing the accuracy of those, you know, trajectories, because we don't have variables like the height. We don't have variables like the distance. So there's nothing definitive that I've seen that says exactly where any of those bullets went. I think the prosecution tried to show with those diagrams, but I think the defense did a good job saying, look, you haven't showed us anything because there are just so many variables that you don't know. I think the witness actually said, you're right, it's not definitive.
Mm-hmm. Abby 18 from YouTube, Michael, will his reputation and persona affect his outcome despite the evidence? What do you think, Michael? Is Melly's, who he is, his persona, going to affect this at all?
No, you would like to hope that during voir dire, you know, every prospective jury member was not only death qualified, as they needed to be for this case, but also those biases were explored. You know, there's so many cases, so many stories about those in the music business, you know, having these violent encounters. You know, this is not a rare story exactly. It's more interesting because it's really truly a whodunit. But I think there is that kind of dark cloud over the industry and some of the people in it. And so, yeah, it could, if somebody is going to hide that bias, it could be used against this defendant in this case. I think they'd have to overlook a lack of evidence to get there at this point. But yeah, of course, these background questions always impact what happens in a case. But you hope that the folks in the box have been asked about it to the degree that everybody's satisfied they won't hold those biases, if they have them, against this defendant. You can only hope.
Yeah, and a lot of defense attorneys will tell you that cases are won and lost in jury selection. You know, they get a vibe, or they do their research and see who these people are and go from there. All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll take more of your questions, so keep them coming in on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. We'll get to as many of them as we can. I'm Jeanette Levy, and you're watching Law and Crime.